Welcome to our real estate class. Now, the purpose of these audio files really is to give you a supplement to your real estate education. My name is Karthik Subramaniam, and I have been teaching these real estate classes now for over 15 years. I've taught thousands of students the basics of real estate, and I'm very confident that I can help you in this journey of getting your real estate license. You'll see the term caveat emptor here at the middle of page number 2. And right next to caveat emptor, I'd write the words, let the buyer beware. So maybe you've heard of that before, caveat emptor. Basically what this means is, I'll give you an example. Let's say you bought a used car off Craigslist. You have to be careful to make sure that you're not going to get screwed, right? Because maybe the air conditioning doesn't work and the seller tries to meet you on a cold winter night, so you're less likely to try on the air conditioning. Maybe the sunroof sticks and the seller kind of tries to draw your attention away from the sunroof. So a lot of things in life, you do have to be careful before you buy something. I just was talking to a friend of mine who recently got engaged, and he showed me a picture of the ring that he got for his wife. And I said, wow, that's a beautiful ring. He goes, yeah, I only paid $2,500 for it. I said, $2,500? That sounds pretty cheap for a diamond. He goes, yeah, I got it on Craigslist. I said, you got your wife's wedding ring on Craigslist? You're pretty gutsy, man. So the truth is that if you buy a used diamond off Craigslist, you have to be careful just so that you don't get screwed. But interestingly, right next to caveat emptor, I would write the words no longer applies. This concept of caveat emptor no longer applies in the sale of real estate. I'll give you an example of this. If you buy my house and let's say the roof leaks, I have to tell you that the roof leaks. If I don't, you could sue me and I would probably lose because I have to disclose a leaky roof as a seller to the buyer. If you buy my house and the foundation's messed up, or there's even like a loud neighbor next door, I have to disclose those things because it could affect ultimately your decision to buy that home. So caveat emptor, while it's true, this is kind of the precept in a lot of business transactions. It's definitely not the case, particularly in residential real estate, because the seller has to disclose everything that seller knows is wrong with the property. So caveat emptor no longer applies. And really where this comes from at the bottom of page number 2 is the Business and Professions Code. And you'll see that term Business and Professions Code in bold at the bottom of page number 2. So the Business and Professions Code is where all real estate law can be found. So all of our real estate laws are found in this set of rules called the Business and Professions Code. So later on in this chapter, we'll look at all the things that you absolutely cannot do with a real estate license in California. I'll give you an example. Anytime you run an ad as a real estate agent, in the ad, you have to have your license number in the ad. If you don't, you violated the Business and Professions Code. Every time you take money from a client, you have to put that client money in a totally separate account called a trust account. If you commingle it with your own money, you violated the Business and Professions Code. So again, all of our real estate laws can be found in this set of rules called the Business and Professions Code here at the very bottom of page number 2. Now at the top of page 3, I would look at the term Bureau of Real Estate at the very top of page number 3. So the Bureau of Real Estate is the regulatory body that issues all of our real estate licenses. Now, how many people do you think have a real estate license in California? Well, there are a lot of people that have a real estate license in California, and mainly because it's so easy to get. Or you take my class, suffer for 9 weeks, hear some bad jokes, and all of a sudden 9 weeks later, you're a real estate agent. So you have a lot of people that kind of try out for the business of potentially selling real estate. Now, today, there's over 400,000 real estate licensees in California. That's a lot of people. Now, actually, if you go back to 2007 at the height of the last market, there was over 500,000 real estate licensees just in California alone. Now, a lot of people hear that statistic and say, man, if everybody and their mom already has a real estate license, it's funny because I did this class yesterday in San Diego. Literally, there was someone and her mom in the front row getting their real estate licenses together, which is fine. But if everyone and their mom already has this license, how am I supposed to make any money if there's already so many real estate agents out there? Well, the answer to that really lies in the fact that you've heard of the 80-20 rule, right? Where 80% of the business is done by 20% of the people. This is probably closer to like the 90-10 rule. this is where like 90% of the business is done by 10% of the agents. So there's always an entry point for new people wanting to get into our business because there's so many people that have this license that really don't use it. I'm sure you probably know someone or knew someone who has or had a real estate license in California that just doesn't use it. And that's quite common. So don't feel concerned about that. There's always a spot for a great, hardworking new agent in our great real estate business. Now, the Bureau of Real Estate, again, top of page 3, is the regulatory body that issues our license. Now, at the bottom of page 3, you'll see the term real estate commissioner at the bottom of page 3. So the real estate commissioner, no matter what day you take the test or what version of the exam you happen to get, you're probably going to get a question or two on the test about the real estate commissioner. And I want to give you all those right now. Now, the first thing I would make a note of at the bottom of page 3, right near where it says real estate commissioner, I would write the words appointed by governor. So anytime we have a new real estate, or anytime we have a new governor, I should say, in California, we get a new real estate commissioner to go along with him or her. Now, what does the commissioner do all day? Well, if you look at the top of page 4, you'll see this gray box that says real estate commissioner. I would make a couple of notes here. Now, the first thing I would look at is this first black square at the top of page 4 where it says screens candidates for licensing. So the real estate commissioner screens you for a real estate license. Now, what that means, of course, is that the real estate commissioner will investigate your criminal background to determine whether or not you can get a real estate license. Now, as it relates to criminal background checks, because I know a lot of people have this question and they say, well, Karthik, what if I've been convicted of something? And, having done this for so long and taught thousands of students, tens of thousands really, to get their license, I have heard everything from a DUI, or I've heard, somebody had a burglary at a college party that one of my students had, that he broke into a house as a part of a college prank, and he was, convicted of burglary. I mean, all sorts of stuff I've heard. The person that will ultimately determine whether or not you can get a real estate license is the real estate commissioner. So the real estate commissioner will basically determine whether or not you can get a license. And let me ask you this. Do you think that all convictions should stop you from getting a license? Well, what about a DUI? Do you think that a DUI should stop you from getting a license? Now, a lot of people have had a DUI and they say, well, no, I had my DUI, someone might say 20 years ago. I was never convicted before. Nothing's happened since. I made a horrible mistake one day and I had a DUI. The real estate commissioner will look at that and the totality of the application and determine whether or not you can get a license. Now, the good news is, even if the real estate commissioner initially denies the license, ultimately you'll always be entitled to a hearing. So you'll always be entitled to a hearing to determine whether or not you're fit for a license. So again, the commissioner initially is going to screen you for a license. Now, some students ask, well, do they check your credit before they give you a real estate license? They do not. We do not have to go through a credit check to get our license. Now, they will check your child support payment history, and I'll talk about that later on in this chapter. But the background check is done by the real estate, or reviewed anyway, by the real estate commissioner. I would also make a little note here next to this gray box on page 4. I would make a little note where it says investigates complaints against licensees. You might want to write that next to the gray box at the top of page 4. The real estate commissioner will investigate a complaint against you. Now, be careful, though, for the test. If the test were to ask you who prosecutes you for a suspected violation of the real estate law, the prosecution is done by the district attorney. So be careful of this on the test. If the question on the exam were to say, who will investigate complaints against licensees? The commissioner. Prosecution for a violation of the real estate law, of course, is done by the district attorney. So I'll give you an example of this. Let's say that I'm your real estate agent and I steal $10,000 from you. Now, of course, you're going to be pissed because I took 10 grand from you, as you should be, and you're going to complain about me to the real estate commissioner. Now, initially, the real estate commissioner will investigate that complaint. Now, if it's true, ultimately, that I did steal $10,000 from you, do you think I should be jailed for stealing $10,000 from you? Of course I should go to jail, right? I stole from you 10 grand. So who's going to ultimately prosecute me that's going to be the DA. So be careful of this distinction on the test. If the question said, who investigates complaints against real estate licensees? The commissioner. Who prosecutes you for a suspected violation of the real estate law? The DA prosecutes you. Remember, how did the commissioner get his job? He was appointed by the governor. Now, by the way, the only reason I'm saying he is because it is a he currently. It was a she about 2 commissioners ago, but it's a he now. And the real estate commissioner is appointed by the governor. The commissioner will screen you for a license and will investigate complaints against licensees. Oh, one other thing you might want to write here at the top of page 4 next to this gray box, I would write the words no commission disputes. The real estate commissioner will not get involved in a commission dispute between brokers. So let's say that you and I have a deal, we close it together and the commission's $30,000. Now, I take the whole 30. I don't pay you your half. If you threaten me that you'll complain about me to the real estate commissioner, you can go ahead and complain about me to the real estate commissioner. The commissioner is not going to get involved in that dispute. That's a civil case, and of course, you'll have to hire a private attorney for that. But the real estate commissioner will investigate complaints against licensees, but they will not investigate complaints that involve commission disputes. Those, of course, are civil matters that the commissioner will not be involved in. Now, here at the very top of page number 4, where it says real estate brokerage at the top of page 4, you might want to make a little note. I would write here at the top of page 4 that there are 2 licenses that are issued, or that could be issued anyway, by the Bureau. One of those licenses is a broker license. Another license is a salesperson license. Now, what would you say is the difference between a broker and a salesperson license? Well, there's a few things that you could say, but the high order bit, the most important thing to remember about a broker versus a salesperson is that the broker can operate alone. So right next to real estate broker, somewhere at the top of page 4, I would just write the word alone. Remember, the broker can operate alone. The salesperson's license is only active, and I'm putting active in air quotes, the salesperson's license is only active if that license is also hung with a broker. Now, what I mean by that is, imagine you got a salesperson's license, but you haven't yet chosen a broker to work it with or for yet. You cannot do anything that would require a real estate license because that license has to be hung with a broker. So the salesperson's license is kind of like a toaster or a TV or a refrigerator or any appliance. That appliance can only turn on if it's plugged into the wall. The way you turn on your salesperson's license, of course, is by hanging it with a licensed real estate broker. So let me ask you this, true or false for the test? A salesperson can operate independent of a broker. False, right? A salesperson has to work for a broker in order to do anything that would require a real estate license. Now, if you set up let's say you got your broker's license, and I'll tell you later on this chapter about how to obtain that license, but if you got your broker's license, there's basically 3 ways you could set up your company. And you'll see these at the bottom of 4 and the top of 5. There's 3 ways you could set it up. One way you could set up your brokerage is as a sole proprietorship at the bottom of page 4. You could set it up as a corporation, or you could set it up as a partnership at the very top of page number 5. So those are the 3 ways you could set up your company: sole proprietor, corporation, or partnership. Now here's something interesting. Regardless of how you set up your company, whether it's sole proprietor, a partnership, or a corporation, at all times, at least one person must be duly licensed as a broker. So if you're a broker and you're a sole proprietor, you yourself personally need a broker's license. If you're a corporation, your corp will have to have a licensed officer responsible for the day-to-day activities at the corporation. So big companies like, Coldwell Banker, Century 21, or Keller Williams, or Remax, these companies are typically set up as corporations. And really, those companies will always have one licensed broker responsible for the day-to-day activities at the corporation. Now, being the broker of record for a large real estate office can be a problem, candidly, because if you have 2, 3, 4, 500 real estate agents working for you, and one of those people does something wrong, and they screw up, your personal broker's license could be subject to disciplinary action in the event that your salesperson messes up. So again, if you're a sole proprietor, what do you need? A broker license. If you have your real estate company set up as a corporation, bottom of page 4, you'll have to have a licensed officer responsible for the day-to-day activities at the corporation. At the top of page 5, if you're a partnership, you yourself will need, or one of the partners, I should say, will need a broker's license. So again, no matter how you cut it, sole proprietor, corporation, or partnership, at least one person must always be duly licensed as a broker responsible for what happens within the organization. Now again, that job carries a significant level of risk, having being the broker of record, because again, you personally are responsible for what happens within the organization, and your license could be subject to disciplinary action in the event that one of your salespeople screws up. Now here at the top of page 5, I would also note that you could have a fictitious business name. Now, a fictitious business name really is any name that is different than your real name. So if your name is Fred Flintstone, you could be Fred Flintstone DBA Century 21, or Fred Flintstone DBA Fred's Realty. Now, if you're going to have a fictitious business name, what you need, frankly, is you will need to file paperwork with the county clerk in the county that your business is in, get that DBA or doing business as filed, send that DBA up to the real estate commissioner, and that DBA will be tied to your license. So a fictitious business name statement has to be first filed with the county clerk, sent up to the Bureau of Real Estate, and the real estate commissioner will approve the DBA. So obviously the DBA cannot be violating some real estate law, it cannot be discriminatory in some way, but you will ultimately need that DBA approved by the real estate commissioner. Now here at the bottom of page 5, you'll also see the term license inspection at the bottom of page number 5. So what happens really when you get your real estate license is your broker will basically have to hold your physical license at the broker's main office. And you'll see this, of course, at the bottom of page number 5, where it says license inspection. I would highlight that last sentence in that paragraph. It says, the licenses of any salespeople working for the broker must be on file at the broker's main office. And you might want to underline those words, main office, very important for the test. Because think about this for a second. Like, I'll give you an example. Let's say a large real estate company like Coldwell Banker. So Coldwell Banker, just like Keller Williams and Century 21 and RE/MAX, a lot of these companies are franchises. They're like McDonald's. They're all independently owned and operated. Now, what that means, of course, is that most of these offices will have separate owners, and they're all separate companies. Now, candidly, though, if you look at a company like Coldwell Banker actually has some of their offices that are corporate owned. Now, the headquarters for the corporate Coldwell Banker, I'll give you an example of some of the corporate owned Coldwell Bankers. Coldwell Banker Beverly Hills, Coldwell Banker Manhattan Beach. All of those offices are corporate offices. Their headquarters are actually in Mission Viejo in South Orange County. Now, imagine you work at the Beverly Hills office of Coldwell Banker. Your physical salesperson's license will not be in Beverly Hills, even though that's the branch office where you work. It'll be on file at the broker's main office. So watch this, true or false? The licenses of any salespeople working for the broker must be on file at the branch office where the salesman works. False. True or false? The licenses of salespeople working for a broker must be posted in the public view. No, I'm not saying anything about having them posted, but I am saying that the physical license has to be on file at the main office of the broker. So very important. You get a salesperson's license, your physical license is on file at the broker's main office. Now, if you're talking about, franchise companies or companies that are like individually owned, where you work is their main office because they don't have any branches. But if you work for Berkshire Hathaway is the same way. A lot of the Berkshire Hathaway offices are part of a large conglomerate. Actually, a friend of mine named Bruce, he has 18 offices and 2,000 real estate agents that work for him. His main office is in Cerritos. Now, if you work out of his office in Ontario, which is 40 miles away from Cerritos, your license is not on file in Ontario, it's on file in Cerritos. So again, bottom of page 5, the licenses of any salespeople working for the broker must be on file at the broker's main office. Now, another thing I'd look at the bottom of page 5 where it says broker-salesperson relationship, you know there's two ways that you could work for someone. At the bottom of page 5 and the top of page 6, there's two ways you could work for someone. You could work for someone as an independent contractor, or you could work for someone as an employee. Now, in our great real estate business, you could either be treated as an independent contractor or an employee. You're actually both. It just depends on who's asking. For example, somewhere at the bottom of page 5 or the top of page 6, I would write the word employee. And then next to employee, I'd write employee-law, L-A-W. In the eyes of the real estate law, the salesperson is always considered an employee of the broker. What that means, of course, is that if you as a salesperson do something wrong, not only are you in trouble, the broker is also in trouble. So that's characteristic of an employer-employee relationship, right? So in the eyes of the real estate law, you'll always be considered an employee of the broker. However, I would write independent contractor somewhere at the bottom of page 5 or the top of page 6. And next to independent contractor, I would write the words tax, compensation, work hour requirements. So for tax purposes, compensation purposes, and work hour requirements, real estate salespeople are typically considered independent contractors. Here's what I mean by that. Tax purposes. You do not get a W-2 form. You get a 1099 form, typically as a real estate salesperson. What that means is there's no withholding generally for most real estate agents. So if you close a $15,000 commission, the broker will give you the $15,000. They don't withhold taxes like they would if you were an employee. Now, does that mean you don't pay taxes? Of course not. We all have to pay our taxes. It's just that the taxes, of course, are not withheld. We pay those on our own. That's characteristic of an independent contractor relationship. Compensation purposes, we are independent contractors also. What that means, of course, is that, I hope I'm not disillusioning you. You probably know this already. There's no starting salary in our real estate business. We are 100% commission only. We eat what we kill. Work hour requirements, we are independent contractors. Does your broker tell you when to come in the morning, when to go home at night, when to take a lunch? No. We are independent contractors for work hour requirements. So again, you got to be very careful on the test. Tax, compensation, work hour requirements, we are treated as independent contractors. In the eyes of the real estate law, we're always considered employees. So again, you got to be very careful on the test about this. If the test is asking, are you an independent contractor or are you an employee? Again, it depends on who's asking the question. Now, I want to show you something at the bottom of 7. We'll come back to that in a second, but I want to show you something on 8, 9, and 10 and 11 here. If you look on pages 8 through 11, you'll see a sample independent contractor agreement. This is a contract. Well, you tell me, who is this contract between? Yeah, this contract is between the broker and the salesperson, or the broker and the associate licensee. So at the very top of page number 8, I would write 3 words. I'd write the words required by law. The law will require that all salespeople with their broker have an independent contractor agreement, some written document between the two of them. So again, if a broker gets audited by the Bureau of Real Estate, one of the first things the auditor does is the auditor will check to see is the original license of the salesperson on file in the broker's main office, number 1. And number 2, they'll also make sure that there is a written document between that broker and the salesperson. Now, you don't need to necessarily use this document. You could literally have a document on toilet paper signed by both parties in crayon. That'll work legally. But this is a common independent contractor agreement on pages 8 through 11 that's used in real estate brokerage. Now, what are some things that you would probably want clearly spelled out in your contract with your broker? Well, some things you'd probably want clearly spelled out are like commission splits. Maybe you know this already, but you know that's how real estate brokers make money, right? All these companies like Coldwell Banker and Century 21 and Keller Williams, they typically hire a ton of real estate agents to work for them. Every time you close a deal, the broker takes a certain piece out of every check. And that's going to be 20, 30, 40, 50%. Out of every check, the broker's going to basically eat. If I was working for a broker, I sure as heck would want to know what percentage are you going to take, right? So compensation is something on page numbers 8 through 11 that you'd probably want clearly spelled out in your contract with your broker. Another thing that you'd probably want clearly spelled out in your contract with your broker are fees. This is kind of a common trend over the last probably 10 years in the real estate business is that, back when I started, most salespeople were on like a 50-50 commission split with their broker, maybe 60-40, but the broker basically provided a lot. The broker would, for example, run ads on the paper. The broker might pay for your for sale signs to be put up. The broker might even pay for your business cards or whatever it is. Today, what happens is that salespeople have squeezed brokers like a teenage pimple, and brokers are forced to pay 70, 75, 80, 90, 100% commission back to the salesperson, and the broker really candidly can't afford to provide a ton of these services like they would before, mainly because, the broker isn't really taking too much out of every commission from the salesperson. So now brokers generally, and you can find exceptions to this, but generally commission splits are much higher now to the benefit of the salesperson. But most brokers, at least in major metropolitan areas like Los Angeles or Orange County or the Bay Area, they're going to charge you some fee to work there, whether it's $50 a month or $100 a month, or if you have an office, it's $300 a month or $500 a month or whatever it is. If I was a salesperson, I would want to know what those fees look like that I have to pay the broker if those are applicable. Another thing I would draw your attention to, of course, here is on page 10. Check out paragraph 10 on page 10. There's this paragraph about automobile. Basically, what this paragraph is saying is that salespeople have to add their broker as an additional insured. Basically, what this paragraph is saying is that the salesperson has to add the broker as an additionally insured on the salesperson's car insurance. Why? Because remember, in the eyes of the real estate law, we are treated as employees of the broker. So if you get in a car accident, God forbid, while you're showing property or you're on your way to an appointment or you're acting in the scope and course of employment, basically the broker could be liable for that, which is why the standard California Association of Realtors contract is going to call in paragraph 10 for the salesperson to have minimum amounts of insurance. Also, it's going to call for the broker to be named as an additional insured on the car insurance of the salesperson. Now, you don't need to know this for the test, but in 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months or however long you're studying these classes, after you finish, if your broker says, "Hey, Sally, add me as an additional insured on your car insurance," I don't want you to be caught off guard by that, right? The broker is going to require that mainly because you're an employee in the eyes of the company. I mean, another way to look at this is imagine you're sitting at a red light and God forbid a UPS truck barrels into the back of your car, rear-ending you. Now, not only could you sue the driver of that truck, but who else could you sue? UPS, right? Because UPS is responsible for what happens while that driver is acting in the scope and course of employment. So long story short, the salesperson must add the broker as an additional insured on the salesperson's car insurance, and that's, of course, here in this independent contractor agreement. If you look here on page number 12, you'll see pages 12 and 13. This is not a full list, but it's close. Pages 12 and page number 13 basically list most of the things that you could do with a real estate license in California. Now, think about this. What's one thing you can do with a real estate license in California? Okay, you can sell houses. Hopefully that's not a shock to you, right? You can sell houses with a real estate license in California. You can sell commercial real estate with a real estate license in California. You can sell raw land with a real estate license in California. You can do middle of page 12. You can do mobile homes if you want to ruin your life. I'm kidding. You can do mobile home sales in California with a real estate license. You can be a loan officer at the bottom of 12 and the top of 13. Now, I would caution you, I don't want to mislead you. If you're doing loans with a real estate license, you'll also need to take another 20-hour class called NMLS. NMLS stands for National Mortgage License Systems, and you'll need an NMLS endorsement. And you'll see this, of course, at the top of 13 if you want to do loan origination. But you can do that with a real estate license plus your NMLS endorsement. You can do mineral oil and gas deals. You can do commercial leasing. This is a kind of an interesting thing. every retailer, Chipotle, Starbucks, Chase Bank, 7-Eleven, they all have real estate people that help find them locations to open their stores. I'll give you an example. Chipotle, I won't name their names, but you can find them online. Chipotle, a lot of those restaurants that have opened in Southern California, all those deals were done by one broker in Corona Del Mar, down in Orange County, who handles the Chipotle account. Nordstrom Rack is handled by a particular real estate agent in Irvine. And a lot of the Nordstrom Racks that were opened in Southern California, every time they open a location, he gets paid. There's a gentleman in El Segundo that has the Chase Bank account for most of Southern California. Every time Chase Bank opens a location, that gentleman gets paid. And, that's just another aspect of real estate. So I'll let you follow whatever path you end up in. But I know a lot of people that take our real estate classes are kind of in transition. They're not sure, what they want to do with their license when they grow up, right, when they finish. But there's a lot more that you can do with this real estate license than just sell houses. Now, don't misunderstand me. You can make a great living selling houses, but there's a lot more ways that you can make money in real estate that involve more than just selling houses. So just something to think about. So let's look here at page number 14. And on page 14, you'll see the term business opportunity brokerage. And this is also another aspect of real estate specialization that you could get involved in if you choose to. Now, two things I would write on page number 14. The first thing I would write is I'd write the words not a real estate transaction. Business opportunity brokerage is not a real estate transaction. This involves the sale of personal property, not real estate. Now, here's what I mean by that. So think of a business. Okay, a liquor store, a car wash, a coin-operated laundromat, a dry cleaner, whatever. Imagine a restaurant, let's say. That's a business. A real estate agent could sell a restaurant. Now, do you think most restaurants own the property that they're in, or are they paying rent? Paying rent, right? Most restaurants don't own their building. So if you bought that restaurant, you would not get a deed to the restaurant. You would actually get something called a bill of sale. So business opportunity transactions are actually transferred using a bill of sale. Now, if it were a real estate transaction, you would get a deed. Personal property transactions are transferred using a bill of sale. So be careful of this question on the test if you get it. Title to a business is transferred using what document? Bill of sale. Title to real estate is transferred using a deed. Now, business opportunity transactions, the challenge, well, let me ask you this before we move on, because this is a question that I get at least semi-frequently when I do this lecture in person. A lot of people ask, well, Karthik, why are business opportunities under real estate licensees? Shouldn't this be some kind of like business license or a license to sell a business? Well, think about it for a second. If you bought my restaurant, you're also probably either going to be taking over my lease, or you may be signing a new lease with the landlord. Either way, selling this business involves lease negotiation experience and lease negotiation expertise, which is why the state of California puts this under real estate licensing too, because of the lease negotiation piece of the transaction. So business opportunities do not involve the sale of real estate. They are personal property transactions, number one. Number two about businesses, they're transferred, of course, using a bill of sale. Now, think about this. I mentioned a restaurant earlier. What is a restaurant worth? What do you think a restaurant costs? Well, it'll depend on the restaurant and how much revenue that restaurant is doing and how much profit ultimately that restaurant has. So imagine a really, really, really super busy restaurant making $1 to $2 million a month in sales. That restaurant's going to be worth a heck of a lot more than a restaurant that has a D rating with the health department and has roaches everywhere and, a 1-star review on Yelp. So here's the challenge. You want to buy my restaurant as a potential buyer. Naturally, you're going to ask to look at the books. Makes sense. When you look at those books, they're probably going to be not accurate. Because do you think most small restaurants have audited financial statements stamped by a CPA at the end of each month? Of course not, right? Most restaurants, maybe the restaurant owner has a Rolex and a big Mercedes and, $800 in his pocket, but he or she might be cheating on his tax return. Now, you and I, we don't cheat on our taxes, but a small business owner owning a restaurant? They might. So the challenge, of course, is in valuation. And in fact, you might want to write that, of course, at the bottom of page number 14, right near where it says taking and handling the business opportunity listing. I would write the words challenge in valuation. The challenge in valuation, of course, is how do you know what that restaurant makes, right? You don't know what that restaurant makes. So here's what you have to do. You might have to get a little creative. You might have to, for example, do just sit there for a week, every day for a whole week. You might have to sit there and, count how many people come in and how many people, what they buy. In the case of, let's say, a coin-operated laundromat business, you might have to do a utility audit where you know how many gallons of water are used in a cycle of the wash, you know how much natural gas is used in a cycle of the dryer, and you kind of reverse engineer how much money that particular coin laundromat is doing. The point is that that's a lot different than comping out a house, right? You want to know what a house is worth? You just look at what the house next door sold for and you get an idea. When you want to know what a restaurant's worth, you cannot look at what the restaurant next door is doing because they might have sales that are totally different than yours. So again, business opportunity brokerage is an aspect of the real estate business that is a specialization. So you could say, look, I have a real estate license. I do commercial real estate with a subspecialty in businesses, with a subspecialty in restaurants. That's a pretty niche aspect of your career, but there's some real estate agents that's all they do. They sell coin-operated laundromats, they sell restaurants, they sell dry cleaners, they sell bars and nightclubs. That is something you can do with a real estate license in California. But remember, you're not buying the land and the building most of the time. You're buying the furniture, fixtures, equipment, and goodwill. Now, another thing I would look at here on page number 15 at the bottom is the prepaid rental listing service business. Now, a couple things that I would do here. First, at the bottom of 15, I would write 3 words. I'd write the word sell a list. What the prepaid rental listing service license lets you do is it lets you sell a list. They might say, well, sell a list of what? You can sell a list of available rental property. And probably one of the most successful PRLS businesses ever created is a website called westsiderentals.com. Westsiderentals.com, basically how they made their money is basically they started a website a long time ago that basically sells a list of properties available for lease. Now, so I want to live in Manhattan Beach and I have a budget of $3,500 a month for rent, let's say. Now, I want to find an apartment or find a place to live. Now, I could go to Craigslist, but what's the challenge with Craigslist? Well, I might get murdered, right? I don't want to go to Craigslist. Challenge with Craigslist maybe is that I might not be dealing with someone who's actually the owner. Challenge with Craigslist, maybe the property's in foreclosure. So the PRLS business basically vets these properties, at least in theory. The PRLS business vets these properties and gives you a clean list of available rental property in Manhattan Beach. Now, this is basically like a subscription service. So as a PRLS licensee, I will basically compile a list of properties available for lease, and through that list, I'll be able to subsequently resell it. So now a couple things here, 3 things we got to know about PRLS. First, I hope you wrote this down already, bottom of 15. PRLS lets you sell a list. That's it. Number 1. Number 2, you'll see this, of course, here on page number 16. The PRLS license is only good for 2 years. Your real estate license that you're getting here with me is good for 4 years. PRLS is good for 2. And you might want to write that at the bottom of 15 or the top of 16 somewhere here. Bottom of 15 is where you'll find it. And the third thing I would note here at the top of 16 is that the PRLS business will require a $10,000 bond per location. Now, what's a bond? Yeah, bond is basically insurance. So here's what happens. You go to a PRLS company and it turns out to be run by a bunch of scammers. And you pay them, let's say, $60 for your month-long subscription, and they basically sell you a list of a bunch of fake properties in, Nicaragua, Nigeria, Azerbaijan, Toronto, Canada. They're all over the world. They're not anything in Manhattan Beach. 8 minutes later, you find out that you've been scammed by this PRLS company. Well, because you have a PRLS license, you're required to maintain a $10,000 bond per location. And what happens with that $10,000 bond is that If the company doesn't give you your money back, you can get restitution from the bond. Now, are real estate agents required to be bonded? No. PRLS companies are required under the real estate law to maintain a $10,000 bond per location. Now, a lot of people hear, well, $10,000 bond per location. Does that mean a $10,000 bond for every location on my list? No. So if I have, let's say, 100 properties on my list, I don't need a $10,000 bond for all those 100 homes. I just need a $10,000 bond per brick and mortar office location. So if let's say I have a PRLS business in Pasadena and another location in Manhattan Beach, I'll have to have two $10,000 surety bonds because I have two brick and mortar locations. Now, even if I was just an online company, I still have one. I would at least need one bond, mainly because, I have an office address. Even if it's a room out of my home, I still have one location, which is going to require one $10,000 bond. Now here at the bottom of 16, you'll also see the term exemptions from real estate licensing requirements. This is basically a list at the bottom of page 16 of all the people that could conduct real estate related activity, and they do not need a license to do it. Now, you don't need to know all of these, but I do want to draw your attention in particular to two of these. The one that I'd look at is at the bottom of page 16, you'll see the first black square near the middle of that page, anyone dealing with his or her own property. So if you're dealing with your own business, building, land, home, condo, mobile home, you can sell your own property and you don't need a real estate license in order to do it. So number one, a person who deals only with his or her own property. Another one I'd look at the bottom of 16, about the fourth square down, it says anyone holding a duly executed power of attorney from the owner. What's a power of attorney? Well, it's a document that lets you act on someone else's behalf. So if I give you power of attorney, you are now like me. So just like I could sell my house without a real estate license, you could sell my house for me as well because you have power of attorney, and you don't need a real estate license in order to sell my home. Now, of course, you couldn't sell the home to yourself because of the obvious conflict of interest associated with that, but you could sell my house for me without a license. So, and there's others here, of course. If you're an employee of a bank doing real estate loans, you don't need a real estate license to work at a bank. If you're an attorney at law, rendering services in the performance of your duties as an attorney. So maybe you're helping a couple get with a divorce, and they need to sell their home to a family member as part of the divorce settlement. You could facilitate the sale of that house without having a real estate license because it's in connection with your engagement as a lawyer. Now, I'm going to put 17 through about page number 21 kind of together here. It'll make it a little more interesting. It'll make this a little more logical. So let me ask you this. This is just some broad questions as to what it takes to get a real estate license in California. Now, let's talk about the requirements at the bottom of 17, clear through to about page number 21. Let's talk about the requirements to obtain a real estate license in California, both a salesperson and a broker license. Now, to get either license, do you need to be 21? No, 18. To get either license, do you need to have a college degree? No. Not even for the broker's license, you don't. How about this? For either license, do you need a high school degree? No. Okay, for either license, do you at least need to show that you've entered the country legally? No. They even took that away here recently. Now, candidly, I might feel a certain way about that. My job is not to tell you my opinion. My job is to tell you what the rules are. So, by the way, should they make it harder? Only after you finish, right? Then they can raise the standards. But the point is that to get either of these licenses, you don't need to be 21, just need to be 18. You don't need to have a high school or college degree, not even for the broker license. You don't need to have proof of legal presence. You do need a clear criminal background and have a taxpayer identification number, but you don't need to have a passport or birth certificate or even a green card to get your real estate license in California. Now, they'll check your criminal history. We talked about that earlier in the chapter before you can get a real estate license, right? We know that. Now, they won't check your credit, but they will check your child support payment history at the bottom of 17 and the top of 18. Now, let me ask you this. What's child support? I don't want to insult you, but in case you don't know what child support is, two people make a baby. One's like not around so much. The one that's not around has to pay to take care of the kid. Now, generally, child support is ordered by the court. So the state of California takes child support really seriously. In fact, they will not let you have a driver's license in California if you have back child support. So they definitely might not let you have a real estate license. So here's the deal. If, at the top of page 18, if you have back child support, the real estate commissioner will give you a 150-day temporary license. If you're still on the delinquent child support payer list after 150 days, they'll suspend the license until you're off the list. Of course, the reason they give you that 150 days is so you can make some money to get off the delinquent child support list too. But very commonly asked question on the test, right? The test might say a real estate licensee is attempting to renew his license. The Department of Child Support Services indicates that the party has failed to make the required child support payments. What will happen? Now, the candidate will be issued a 150-day temporary license, right? They won't revoke it. They'll give you a 150-day temporary license. If you're still on that list after 150 days, then they'll suspend it or revoke it. Suspend it, right? They won't revoke the license. They'll just suspend it until you're off the list. Let's get into the nitty-gritty. We know that you have to have a clear criminal background or an approved criminal history. You cannot be delinquent on your child support, or they'll give you that 150-day temporary license. To get a broker license at the top of page 18, I would write two things. First, I'd write the words experience, and then I'd also write the word education. Experience and education. Let's start with the experience requirement first. In order to get a real estate broker's license, you have to fulfill an experience requirement. Now, what that experience is, there's basically one of two ways to qualify. The first way that you could qualify on the basis of experience is to have 2 years of full-time experience in our great real estate business, right? 2 years full-time. Now, the question, of course, is how does the government actually know whether or not you were full-time? Well, you'll have to fill out a document that says how many deals you did, how much money you made, how many hours you worked, and your employing broker would have to sign that as well, number one. Now, a lot of people ask, well, Karthik, is it possible to work 2 years full-time, 40 hours a week for 104 weeks straight and make no money in real estate? Is that possible? Well, I guess it's just you have to explain to the real estate commissioner why you're the most unlucky embryo ever and why every deal you touched for 104 solid weeks in a row exploded on contact. But yeah, I guess theoretically you could work full-time for 2 years and make no money. Now, if you don't have that 2 years of full-time experience, but you want a broker's license anyway, you could also qualify by having a bachelor's degree with a major or minor in real estate. Now, a lot of people say, well, my college didn't offer a college degree with a major or minor in real estate. And I understand that your degree might not be in real estate. And that's kind of the point. Prior to January 1st of 2013, I know that was a long time ago, but prior to January 1st of 2013, this could have actually been a college degree in anything. You could have had a degree in Russian and chemistry and literature and physics and math and English, and that would have qualified you as though you had 2 years full-time experience. But today, the degree has to have been with a major or minor in real estate, right? So again, first piece to getting a broker's license is experience. Either 2 years full-time or a bachelor's with a major or minor in real estate. For the salesperson's license at the middle of 19, there's no experience requirement. There's only an education requirement. And the education requirement for a salesperson's license is just 3 classes. I hope you knew that. You're in the program already, right? There's 3 classes: real estate principles, real estate practice, and an elective class. Now, that elective, of course, you'll see all these black squares at the middle of page 19. Those are the possible electives that you could take. Now, here's the nice thing about the 8 classes for the broker's license. The 8 classes that you need for the broker's, 3 of those 8 are in the salesperson's license anyway. So once you get your sales license, you're 3/8 of the way to getting a broker's license. as it is, right? So again, to get a salesperson's license, education only, broker's license, education, and experience. Then you'll move on to take the real estate exam. The real estate exam on pages 19 and 20, all the real estate tests are multiple choice, A, B, C, and D. There's no short answer. There's no essay. There's no free response. It's just 150 multiple choice questions for the salesperson's license. You're given 3 hours and 15 minutes to complete the sales license exam. Broker's test is 200 questions. It's given in a 2.5-hour morning session and a 2.5-hour afternoon session. Passing score on this test is a 75% or better. Now, I know a lot of you are perfectionists and you want to get 100% in everything that you do. That's a really useful attitude to have in life, but this is not one of those times. The state doesn't care what you get on the test if you pass it. In fact, if you and I take the test, let's say we both took the broker's test, you got 150 questions out of 200 questions right, barely passing, 75%. Let's say I take it and I ace it, 200 out of 200. You and I will walk to our cars after the test with the exact same pass notice. The state does not tell you what you got on either test unless you fail it. If you fail it, they'll say, okay, you needed to get a 70, let's say for the sales exam. You got a 69, that would suck. And here's how you did in each of the 7 categories that you'll see at the middle of page 21. So the middle of 21, of course, are the 7 categories that are on the real estate exam. And again, you need to get a 75% on the broker's test, 70% on the sales test in order to pass. Now, you'll never, ever have to take the real estate exam again unless you do what I'm about to say, so don't do this. Every 4 years, you're going to have to renew your real estate license, and you'll see this at the bottom of page number 20. So every 4 years, you'll have to renew. Now, this renewal basically entails, taking classes and online classes mainly in like agency ethics, trust fund handling, fair housing, risk management, all that sort of thing. So long story short, you will have to renew your license every 4 years. Now, if you forget to renew your license, the state's actually pretty cool about this. The state will basically give you 2 years. If you forget to renew it or you can't renew it for whatever reason, the state will give you a 2-year grace period. Now, please don't misunderstand me. During these 2 years at the bottom of page 20 and the bottom of 21, during these 2 years, you cannot work. Your license is technically expired, but you're in this weird like limbo position where as long as you pay the late fee, pay the renewal fee, and take the renewal classes, you will not have to take the real estate exam all over again. The problem will arise if you let your license expire, then you wait more than 2 years from the date that it expired to renew. Then you'll have to requalify for and retake the whole real estate test all over again. So at the bottom of page 21, if a license is not renewed before it expires, the licensee's real estate activities must cease immediately. But a license that is not renewed before it expires, again, may be renewed at any time up to 2 years from its expiration date. If you wait beyond that 2 years, you'll have to requalify for and retake the real estate exam all over again. Now, if you look here at the top of 22 where it says the real estate license number, your real estate license number must be on all first contact material with the public. First contact material basically means, business cards, websites, email signature blocks, flyers, brochures. Anytime the public would be meeting you for the first time, you will have to have your license number on all first contact material with the public. So keep that in mind that your license, by the way, a lot of students are kind of confused by this. They ask, well, is it my license number? Is it the broker's license number, or is it both? It's your license number. Now, the broker's name has to be on the material as well, but the license number is the salesperson or the broker associate's license number only. The broker's license number does not need to be on the first contact material. Now, I don't want to confuse you. When I say broker associate, all I mean by that is a licensed real estate broker working for another licensed real estate broker, basically in a salesperson capacity, right? So again, it's not the broker's license number, it's the associate licensee's license number that must be on all first contact material with the public. Now, at the bottom of 22 through 23, you'll see, of course, where it says enforcement of the real estate law. So long story short, you'll have to always be entitled to a hearing before the real estate commissioner can suspend or revoke a real estate license. The licensee is always at the top of page 23 entitled to a hearing. Now, the result of that hearing, of course, may result in your license being suspended, your license being revoked, the case being dismissed or restricted. So, again, the real estate commissioner cannot take a license away without giving you a hearing. Now, if your license is already disciplined in some way, that means, of course, you already have a suspended or restricted license. The license can be subject to further disciplinary action without a subsequent hearing. But if your license is clean, the real estate commissioner cannot suspend or revoke a license without first giving you a hearing. Now, at the bottom of 23 through 25, you'll see, of course, where it says types of violations. So basically, these two pages, 24 and 25, are basically all of the thou shalt nots of the real estate law. These are all of the things that you absolutely cannot do with a real estate license in California. And again, if you look at the top of 24, ultimately, these are all violations of the Business and Professions Code. So ultimately, all of these are violations at the top of page 24 of the Business and Professions Code. So I'll give you a few things here. First, if you look at the top of page number 24, about the top half, you'll see the term commingling at the top half of 24. So commingling is basically mixing your money with the client money. Anytime you take client money, that client money has to be kept in a totally separate account called a trust account. If you put that in your own personal account, you violated the Business and Professions Code. So at the top of 24, right, top half, commingling, mixing broker money with client money. Remember, client money must be kept inside of a trust account. Now, in that paragraph about commingling, you'll see this $200 rule. The real estate commissioner allows a real estate broker to keep up to $200 of their own money in the trust account without being guilty of commingling, basically to cover bank service charges on the account. So now you got to be careful. Am I saying you could keep $200 of client money in your account? No way. You can't have any client money in your account. You could keep $200 of your money, though, in the trust account to cover those bank service charges without being guilty of commingling. That's, of course, at the top half of 24. You'll also have maybe a couple of other questions on the exam about trust fund handling, and I want to give you a couple of those right now. So the first thing I would note is I would write the word at the margin on page 24, withdrawals from trust account. The question is, who could withdraw from the trust account? Now, there's only 3 people that are permitted to withdraw from the trust account. By the way, the trust account has whose money? Client money. Now, the client actually is not one of the people that could withdraw from the trust account because there's other clients' monies in that same account. There's no law that requires segregated trust accounts. You could have one big fat trust account and just throw everybody's money in the same account, and that would actually be legal. So clients cannot withdraw from the trust account. There's only 3 people that could withdraw. First, the broker can withdraw from the trust account. An appointed salesperson could withdraw from the trust account. Now notice I'm saying appointed salespeople, not all salespeople. Not every salesperson just like randomly has access to the trust account. It's only those salespeople that are authorized by the broker. Also, an unlicensed employee of the broker could withdraw from the trust account, but only if that unlicensed employee is what? Bonded. Now, what's a bond? A bond, of course, is like insurance. So in the event that that unlicensed person who hasn't cleared criminal background, hasn't passed the real estate test, if they go crazy and they end up stealing all the money out of the trust account, there's no immediate risk of harm to the public because they're bonded. So again, there's only 3 people that could withdraw from the trust account: the broker herself, an appointed salesperson, or unlicensed employees of the broker that are also what? That are also bonded. Now, could it get confusing having so many different clients' monies inside of the trust account? It could, get confusing having so many different clients' monies in the trust account, which is essentially why the trust account must be reconciled monthly. Balances should be checked daily on the trust account, and the trust account should be reconciled. How often? The trust account should be reconciled monthly. A couple of important things to remember about the trust account. First, trust accounts must be reconciled monthly, number one. Only 3 people are permitted to withdraw from the trust account: the broker himself, an unlicensed employee that's also bonded, or, of course, an appointed salesperson, right? Those are the only people that could withdraw from the trust account. Also, by the way, one other thing that you might want to know for the test: whose name should be on the trust account? Well, it's client money in the trust account, so you might think naturally that the client's name should be on the trust account. But remember, how many clients could we have in the same trust account? We could have as many clients as we want. So the name on the trust account really should be the name of the broker, comma, trust account, comma, trustee. So the name on the trust account has to be the name of the broker, comma, trust account, comma, trustee. So those are some important things to remember about trust account handling in general. And you can see why the real estate commissioner will ask questions on the test about the trust account, because it has to do with keeping client money, right? So no matter what day you take the test or what version of the exam you happen to get, you're always going to get a question or two on the test about trust accounts. Now, a couple of last things I'd look at here from the chapter as we wrap it up. At the top of page 25, you'll see, of course, blind ad. Now, a blind ad is an ad that fails to disclose that the advertiser is an agent. So anytime you run an ad, in the ad, you have to put that you're a real estate licensee in the ad. If you don't, the ad, of course, is a blind ad. So you got to be careful on the test, because you might see a couple of questions on the exam about this. And it's important to remember that a blind ad must disclose that the advertiser is an agent. If you don't, of course, it's known as a blind ad. Again, the curveball on the test might be, does the real estate commissioner require that you put the price of the property in every ad? No. Does the real estate commissioner require that a full address of the property be placed in the ad? No. But the real estate commissioner will require that you have broker identification in every ad, or, of course, it's known as a blind ad, and that's here, of course, on page number 25. Now, a couple of last things I'd look at, of course, from this particular chapter is I'd look at the bottom of page number 28 and the top of 29. There's this discussion about the recovery account at the bottom of 28 and the top of 29. Now, I would note one thing about the recovery account. The first thing I'd note here at the bottom of page number 28 is I would note that this is for uncollectible judgments. So you might want to write that word or those words at the bottom of page number 28. The recovery account is for uncollectible judgments. Now, what's a judgment? A judgment, of course, is a final decision by a court. Uncollectible, of course, implies that the judgment is not able to be collected on. So maybe you sue someone and they flee the country. They file bankruptcy. They just refuse to pay you. In the case of someone that flat out cannot or will not pay, if they're a real estate licensee, the recovery account will basically make that member of the public or client whole again. So again, before the recovery account at the bottom of page number 28 is relevant, the licensee must have been sued and lost, and ultimately the judgment is uncollectible. Now, one note that I would make here at the bottom of 28 and the top of 29 is the real estate commissioner will have certain dollar amounts that they will honor. $1 amount is $50,000. So $50,000 is the maximum amount that the recovery account will ever pay out on any one transaction. So a $250,000 is the maximum amount per licensee at the very top of page number 29. So for your whole life as a real estate agent, the maximum amount that the recovery account will ever pay out is $250,000. Now, of course, the good news is your license will be suspended or revoked way before you get to that $250,000 figure. Now, let me tell you how this might be framed on the exam. So the exam might say a real estate licensee represents a person in the purchase of an apartment building. The real estate licensee lies to that buyer about how much money the building makes, and the licensee is ultimately sued. The client loses $75,000 based on this lie. The client sues the real estate agent and wins. Now, of course, you have a judgment. The agent files bankruptcy and flees the country, essentially rendering that judgment uncollectible. Now, this person could go to the recovery account and file a claim with the recovery account, and the recovery account would pay out $50,000. Now, in my story, the client lost $75,000, but the recovery account, remember, for any one transaction, the maximum amount that they'll pay is $50,000. So again, $50,000 is the maximum amount on any one deal. $250,000 is the maximum amount per licensee. What that means, again, is for your whole life as a real estate agent, the maximum amount that the recovery account will ever pay out to cover something you screwed up is $250,000. Now, this is not like insurance. And the main way this differs from insurance, of course, is that insurance you don't necessarily have to pay back. With the recovery account, you do have to pay this money back. So you might want to make a note of this at the bottom of 28 or the top of 29. I would write the words license suspended until paid back plus interest. Your license will be suspended until you pay the recovery account back this amount plus interest. So again, this is not like insurance. This is, of course, a situation where this must be reimbursed to the Bureau of Real Estate or your license will stay suspended. Now, the last thing I want to share with you from this chapter is on pages 29 and page 30. So on page number 29, you'll see on page number 29 the term realtor. Now, an important thing to remember about realtor, I know that word is kind of ubiquitous. We always use that term realtor for anybody that, for example, sells real estate. But the truth is that the term realtor, in order to call yourself a realtor, like most things in life, you have to pay money. This will cost about $1,200 over the course of a year to call yourself a realtor. Now, that $1,200 is not insignificant. So what do you get for your $1,200 by being a realtor? Well, the first thing you get, and you might want to write this down at the bottom of 29, is I'd write the letters MLS. So in order to have access to the MLS, you'll need to be a realtor. Now, you probably know this already, but what is the MLS? The MLS, of course, is the multiple listing service. And the MLS basically lets you search for property for sale. So if somebody says, hey, I want to buy a house in Hancock Park, I don't get in my Prius and drive all around Hancock Park like a crazy person looking for sale signs. I search the MLS. Then to get in that house, I'll need something called an e-key. And an e-key is an electronic key that allows you to open property for sale. And you'll also get zip forms, right? Zip, like the word zipper. Zip forms is the contract generation software, and zip forms basically will allow you to write up contracts. So again, if you're selling residential real estate, you basically cannot work unless you're a realtor. You'll need the MLS to search for property. You'll need an e-key to open up the door. You'll need the zip form software to write up contracts. So not every real estate agent is a realtor. Again, in order to call yourself a realtor, you have to pay. By the way, it's unethical and illegal to call yourself a realtor if you're not. So very important, right, to join the Association of Realtors, particularly if you're selling residential property. Now, the National Association and the California Association of Realtors did some pretty stupid things over the years. In fact, one pretty stupid thing they did for a long time is they wouldn't let minorities join. So in 1947, a group of predominantly black real estate agents got together and formed something on page 30 called NAREB. NAREB is the National Association of Real Estate Brokers. Those members are called realtists at the middle of page 30. Now today, regardless of your ethnicity, are you probably a realtor or realtist? You're a realtor, right? Most of us. But remember, in order to call yourself a realtor or realtist, you're not automatically a member of such an organization. You have to pay in order to be able to use that registered trademark. Again, this is basically chapter 1, kind of an introductory chapter. How to get a real estate license, the requirements to become a broker, the requirements to become a salesperson, what it means to be a realtor, trust fund handling, some advertising requirements. We talked about the structure of the Bureau of Real Estate, the recovery account. So real introductory chapter. Don't forget to listen to this again. If something didn't make sense, or if there's something that you want to hear again, you have access to this throughout your enrollment period. So don't be shy. Feel free to play this back, and we'll catch you guys in a little bit for Chapter 2.